The Book of Mormon says that the Nephites had specifically metal swords, and I'm going to be honest with you, this is one of those anachronisms that archaeology has not attested yet in ancient America. When evaluating an anachronism, sometimes it means we need to be patient with the archaeological record for more things to be discovered, as has happened with other anachronisms. Sometimes it means we should be setting aside some of our more simplistic assumptions about the text and look at the problem more critically and with some more nuance. For example, a close reading of the text will show that while the Book of Mormon mentions swords 156 times, a lot of people are surprised to learn that it specifies metal swords only twice. And I'll get to those two instances in a bit, but all other 154 occurrences of swords could be referring to something else, and I'll show you what I think it is because it also accounts for the staining of the swords that the Ammonites mention. After looking at the text and comparing it with the material culture we have from the New World, it's highly possible that when the Book of Mormon is talking about swords, it's most often referring to this guy, a maquahuitl. It's a deadly weapon with a wooden cord embedded with sharp obsidian blades along the edge. When the Spanish arrived in the New World, when they saw these weapons, they called them swords, and when the Aztecs saw these Spanish swords, they called them metal maquahuitl. So clearly both of these cultures saw a similarity between these two weapons. Unless you think these would just be used as clubs, these things could cut and slice. Mesoamerican codices show images of human heads and limbs being cut off by these weapons, and some Spanish accounts describe the decapitation of horses with them, and this accords well with the Book of Mormon, which describes both arms and heads being sliced off. The composition of the maquahuitl can account for why we haven't found the many swords that the Book of Mormon talks about at battle sites, because it's made of wood. These weapons broke down so rapidly, almost none survive today, so our knowledge primarily comes from inscriptions, artwork, and colonial accounts. What I love most about this explanation is that it gives the story of the Ammonites burying their weapons a whole new meaning when they say that their swords had become stained with the blood of their brethren, and through the blood of the Son of God, they could become bright once again. Metal swords obviously can be wiped clean, but these weapons would absorb blood in the wood and become permanently stained. So now let's address what those two references to actually metal swords could mean. In the Book of Ether, Shul makes steel swords a few generations after the Jaredite migration from Mesopotamia to the New World. So the early Jaredites were familiar with metalworking, but it's not stated how many steel swords Shul made and whether they were an early anomaly or somehow remained the Norman Jaredite culture. The only other mention of metal swords is the Sword of Laban, which is explicitly said to be steel, but this story takes place in Iron Age Jerusalem, and steel swords have been archaeologically attested in the ancient Near East in Nephi's era. Now, Nephi does take this sword to the New World and even says that he tried to make additional swords after the manner of Laban's sword, but we don't know if this means he forged new metal swords or if he just made it after the same style. And again, like the Jaredites, we don't know if this was an early anomaly in the culture before being overtaken by the maquahuitl, or if this remained the norm in their culture. This does not absolve the need for steel swords in ancient America, but these are important caveats to understand why it might not show prevalently in the archaeological record, since what we know of the archaeological record is like less than 1% of what a society's material culture would have been. And there are other passages that hint at the possibility of other metal swords as well, but again, these can all be interpreted differently depending on the assumptions you're bringing to the text. If you want to get into these other passages and learn about what scholars have to say about them, read KnoWhy 740 at Scripture Central.